During your enlisted time, what was probably the craziest thing you did?
Well, it would definitely be after September 11th doing those shipboarding operations. Like I don't have to think too hard about that. My mind immediately went to bars and things like that. As a new
Yeah.
guy in platoon, but my second platoon was September 11th, and we were about 2 weeks into that second deployment, and we thought we were going to go right into Afghanistan, but instead we loaded up the plane in Guam. We flew in and ended up taking over the shipboarding operations for SEAL Team 3, and those guys ended up going into Afghanistan. But it was the only time during those 20 years that I got to do an actual real world shipboarding operation, multiple. And what we would do is those ships would come out of Iraq, and because of the UN oil embargo, then they take a hard left-hand turn for Iranian waters. And if memory serves, you had about 20 minutes or so, depending on sea state and all the rest of it, to get on those things, take them over, turn them around back into international waters, and then turn them over to a prize crew, which are people that actually know how to drive big ships, which are like class 3 tankers loaded up with this oil. So it was interesting to do that because they put these passive countermeasures in place. And for people listening, a passive countermeasure would be something that is not directly like shooting at you. So they take barbed wire, string it up all over the deck. So if you tried to throw a fast rope out, it would get fouled. So you couldn't fast rope onto the deck. That meant you had to come in from the ocean, which meant that in these crazy sea states, it's a lot harder because they would always wait until they knew it was going to be very difficult for you in a small craft to come up alongside and board. And then if you did do that, then they cut the ladders off on all these different levels. So instead of being able to scamper up, even once you're on board these things, scamper up to the next level, you couldn't do that because they were cut off. And then all the windows and doors were welded shut as well. So you have to get in there with an exothermic torch, with the saw, usually a combination of both, and get in there to take these things over. So you're on the clock to do this.
Yeah.
If you get Iranian waters, you've got to get off that thing ASAP. And so that was pretty interesting. So as an enlisted guy, that was my first like real world type operation. So I would say that was probably the craziest thing I did as an enlisted guy, because it's like I would equate it to being a police officer, pulling somebody over in the middle of the night on the freeway or deserted highway, whatever, and you're walking up to it and you're not exactly sure who's in there, how many people are in there, what their mindset is. You're walking up on an unknown. So same thing here, middle of the night, rough sea state, you're getting on board and you're not exactly sure what you're going to find. So that was probably the craziest thing I did as an enlisted guy.
Yeah, I agree. And I always loved those operations. I was at Team 3, and so we did plenty on my deployments pre 9/11. And I just always felt like that's like true frogman shit right there. You're taking down boats, or, to kick off the war in Iraq, we took down the largest gas oil platform in the world. And, that too, like coming from the surface, going up this huge structure in the middle of the ocean and making it yours. It's like, you say police officer, I say pirates. I'm like, you're just straight up pirates, and you got your ninja hoods on and your MP5s, and you're just ready to go.
MP5 before we switched over to M4. So
yeah,
MP5s and SIG P226s with a light on there, white light on there, clearing all these little things with that light, because even MP5, which everybody, is very small, some of those little spaces are even hard for that.
Yeah.
Swing it and get that pistol out and use that light to get in these weird little corners, and those guys hide.
They do. And I remember the first generation of holsters that came out for our pistols with lights on it. And the lights, keep in mind, were bigger than they are now. And these holsters they look like they definitely would break your femur if you fell on them just right.
Yes, they were large. That's for sure.
Just real quickly, let's go maybe give the listeners, maybe some of them want to be writers. Maybe it doesn't even have to relate to writing. Maybe it's just, the 3 big takeaways to achieving your goals. Let's generalize it. And what would you say those big 3 things are that you've used to get where you are, but could apply to anyone doing anything?
Well, the main one is not to pay too much attention to those odds, because there's always going to be people out there that are going to tell you how hard it is to do something, or do you know the odds of becoming a director in Hollywood? And the implication is obviously, what a silly dream. Like, you'll never, be an Oscar-winning director. Up one day, you'll get a job just like the rest of us. So that's the
odds don't matter.
Yeah, don't pay attention to those odds, because
Okay.
if you do, you're wasting bandwidth. Let's say you have this much bandwidth. Well, now you're worried about how hard something is, and that's bandwidth that is not focused on getting where you want to go. So if that's being a SEAL, well, guess what? If you're worried about not making it through or how hard it is, well, you're even if it's this much or this much or this much, depending, like that needs to be focused on preparing yourself physically, mentally, emotionally for going through that training, for getting where you want to go to operate and serve your country in uniform. So don't pay attention to that side of it. You can't control what those odds are. Hey, that's what should be. That was the draw. 80% attrition. Awesome. I want to test myself there. Now everything else is going in for me sprinting up the hills where I grew up, to putting a rope in the tree and learning how to rappel down, to climbing up onto my roof and shooting that bow, towards going under the basketball hoop in the back and like doing these crazy pull-ups, like, different hand positions before CrossFit was a thing, because I saw in some pictures people climbing ropes and doing things in an obstacle course in buds in like Soldier of Fortune magazine or Gung Ho magazine or whatever it was. A couple of videos that were out, men with green faces, that sort of thing. So that would be the main one, is that. And then, when we're not talking about SEALs or something physical like that, you can almost, especially today, it's much more of a danger today than it was 30 years ago, is you can almost study how to do something too much. You can spend the rest of your life researching today, because there's an infinite amount of information out there on almost any topic when you go down these rabbit holes online. So you can read, let's say, how to be a writer. Okay, I can read this book and that book and this book. I can read this person's blog. I can follow this person. Guess what? You're going to have to sit down and actually do the work at some point if you want to be a writer. But you can do that forever. And if you want to research your novel, guess what? Now that's a whole other thing you can do forever, is just research something without actually doing it. So those are the main ones right there, is not paying attention to those odds and being wary of how much you're researching, rather than the doing and sitting down to do what you want to do. Because even if you don't know it, it might be some of this subliminal thing, an excuse. I have to do a little more research. I have to read how to do it. I don't know how. I got to read this thing. No, you need to sit down and do the work, because if you don't, definitely not going to happen. Even if you do the work, it might not. But if you don't sit down and do the work, it will not, for sure. So those are the main ones.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And the reason, I mean, it's kind of funny you say the odds thing, because I did a Violent Nomad shirt because I used to say it all the time, the odds don't matter. Because if you're in control, then you're in control. So, and that's really the key, is take control of whatever it is and just move forward, and don't worry about all of that peripheral bullshit, because it just doesn't matter.
Yep.
Get on your path, stay on your path, and keep moving, right?
Yep, and it's wasting bandwidth. It's wasting time. It's wasting brain power that can be devoted to that craft, towards getting it, getting you moving the ball forward. So yeah, it can certainly be a hindrance. And then, of course, along the way, I try to pass along to my kids is never miss an opportunity to make somebody's day. So yeah, you're doing all that work, you're putting that work in, you're moving that ball forward. Well, hey, along the way, you can lend a hand here and there. You can make somebody's day. But sometimes,
that's a good one too. I like that, man. Well, thanks for sharing those. You're listening to Can You Survive This podcast? Thanks for tuning in. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and share on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your favorite shows.